Greetings, Benjamin J. from BENZTRAINZ with another in the series. Well, I follow up on that Lionel 33. I have the motor mounted, as you see. I've got the wheels pressed back on. So we're going to do a grand test. Now, I've got my outside rail, of course. So to be able to run this train, even for a few feet, I put another rail beside this one, just using some old track. Now from this outside rail to this inside rail is standard gauge, as you see. So I've got a magnetic lock on here attached to the rail, and I've wrapped tape around one of the alligator clips. I'm going to clip it directly to the motor and to the frame. Now, theoretically, we should be able to run this the length of this cable. So let's turn the power on. All right, power is on. Let's see what happens. And it works, as you see. So no doubt, if I had a track, I could put this together and run it today. No doubt. So for forward and reverse, I will add a switch to the coil. But as you can see, this is going to work just absolutely splendidly. So I went through all the parts that came in the bag with the locomotive. Now I've got the shell epoxied back together. This thing was literally falling apart. I also have the front and rear pilot with the couplers, and I got a message asking me how do you apply power to the motor. As you see, it has a contactor just like O-gauge. So I'll get this thing mounted, get it wired, and as soon as I get some track, I'll be able to run this thing. But as you see, this is going to work absolutely perfectly. So plenty of room for that motor inside the shell. So I just need to get the screws in this thing, get it mounted, and it will be up and running. Far from perfect and in really, really terrible condition. But it's gone from a rusty piece of relic, really, to a running locomotive. So this is far from perfect or pretty, but it works, and it's a really, really simple solution to repowering one of these Lionel locomotives. So I used 5-minute epoxy and screws. There's one of the screws for the motor. As you see, it fit perfectly between the wheels and under the intermediate gear. And I could actually make this look fairly decent if I cut the top of this plate off, but I'm not going to put that much more work into this thing. It's running, that's the important part, and it fits inside the shell. But best of all, of course, is the fact that it's working. It works actually quite well. So anyway, I just want to do a quick follow-up video on repowering a Lionel 33, and this would probably work for a lot of other Lionel locomotives as well. And I'm shorting somewhere right there, I think. So as you see, it works. There's no doubt about that. So I got a message from a gentleman by the name of John Blair, and he's going to be sending me an oval of standard gauge track. He said it's really rusty, but I can de-rust it. That's not a problem at all. And I will set that track up as soon as it gets here, and we are going to be running this circa 1920 Lionel locomotive. It's going to be a lot of fun to see this thing going around a rail. And like I said, this is far from perfect, but it's efficient. It just isn't very pretty. But once the shell is back on this frame, this is actually going to look quite good. I don't think anybody would object to it. The best part of it, of course, is the fact that it works. And it was a simple way, that being a relative term, it was really time consuming to do this. It wasn't necessarily difficult, it just was time consuming. First, figure out how to do it, then assemble the motor, cut off the bottom of the side plate so it would fit in here. You can see I've got these chopped off. And then mounting the motor, mounting that intermediate gear, pushing the wheels or pressing the wheels back on. So it's going to work. There's no doubt about that. It's going to work actually quite well. As you can see, there's no problem with this at all. And you can run it really slow. So the motor is, there's no binding in the gearing at all. As you see, this works really, really well. Like I said, this is rather crude, but it is at least a way to test the motor. As you see, no problem with this at all. It works perfectly. So a fairly simple way to replace the motor in a Lionel 33. Like I said, it'll probably work in a lot of other early locomotives as well. And it gives you a relatively modern motor, and the nice thing about it, of course, is you still have access to the brushes and the armature for lubrication. So without a doubt, this is going to actually work quite well. So it's been an interesting project, there's no doubt about that. If I had a small oval of track, I could run this today. So I will be putting the pilots in vinegar and derusting them. And the main contactor, I'll just clean by hand, very likely scrape it with a razor blade and some oil. But it has the insulators on it, so it just slides into the frame held with these two screws, and of course these two insulators to isolate it from the frame itself. The cab or shell was in just absolutely dreadful condition. It was literally falling apart. It's held together with crimps, and these just they just wouldn't hold anymore. So I've lined them with 5-minute epoxy, pushed them back together, let it set. So this is actually going to work quite well. As you see, if I had the screws in this, I could actually assemble it and put the pilots on either end. And like I said, if I had a track, I could run this thing today. So it was an interesting project, no doubt about that. That motor fits in there, and once this is repainted, I'll probably pull the bell, whistle, and the light off and spray this black, spray these red, just for some contrast, and derust them, of course. And when I get a piece of track or an oval of track or a layout of track of some kind, I'll do a follow-up video of actually running this locomotive. So it was a lot of fun. Took I don't know, probably about 8-10 hours, something like that. Like I said, it wasn't particularly difficult. It's just, it was really time consuming to first figure out how to mount this motor and then modify the motor, build the motor, mount it in there, put the wheels back on it, test it. But so far so good. This is going to run just fine. And like I said, these two pieces of track, this outside rail to that outside rail, is standard gauge. So at least I can put it on a rail and see it run. Albeit for, I don't know, what is that, 1.5 feet, 2 feet maybe? But it works. That's the neat thing about it. It's up and running. Like I said, if I had an oval of track, I could actually get this locomotive assembled today and actually run it around a rail. That would be really, really cool. Anyway, I'll do a follow-up when that track gets here. Like I said, John Blair offered to send it to me. He said it was really rusty, but I will derust it, and we've done that with lots of other track. I'll finish getting this locomotive assembled. Very likely I'll paint it, and when that track is ready, I will do a video of this thing up and running. So anyway, like I said, it was a really interesting project. It was a lot of fun. It was challenging. It was, like I said, it wasn't particularly difficult. It was just really time consuming to have to modify all these things and then mount it on this frame. And I couldn't find any information about mounting a Marx motor in one of these frames. I don't think there is any. But it's a really, really simple way to get one of these things up and running without having to spend a considerable amount of money replacing that original motor. In this case, I had all the parts I needed, so I didn't have to go out and buy anything. And as you can see, it is far from perfect, but it works. That's the neat thing about it. So it was really, really inexpensive, free, in fact. And the best part about it is that it's up and running. Like I said, it's far from perfect, and it's not very pretty. You could, like I said, there's lots of room here. I could cut these almost 3/4 of an inch off these plates to shorten this motor, but why bother? You know, it fits inside the shell, and it's just more work with really no result as far as improving it. And the best part, of course, is just the fact that it's running. Like I said, if I had a layout, I could have this up and running today. So, just a quick follow-up video. A really, really simple way to repower a Lionel 33. This is circa 1920. 1924, 1916, 1918, hard to tell. I'm far from an expert on Lionel antique locomotives. The neat thing about it, of course, is the fact that it's running. And once this is finished, and actually running around an oval of standard gauge track, it's Miller time. I'm going to kick back, have a couple of beers, and watch this thing run. So really looking forward to that. So as soon as that track arrives, I'll probably do a video on derusting that track. From what Mr. Blair said, it was in poor condition. Excuse me. But I've derusted those two, and they are running perfectly. So I'm sure it'll work just as well as standard gauge track. In any case, I'll do a video on it. Excuse me again. So anyway, I just want to do a quick follow-up on this. Like I said, if I had some track, I could actually have this thing up and running today. And I'm really looking forward to that now. When I first got this, it was just an experiment. And once I realized that there was a possibility of getting this running, it turned into a real project. And as you see, it is far from perfect, but it's efficient. It didn't cost anything. Best of all, it brought this dead locomotive, this really old dead locomotive, back to life. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this thing running on a rail. Anyway, just a quick follow-up. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. BENZTRAINZ@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for watching.